hear me okay, then that'll be good. Can't hear you. Oh god, that's not good. Right, bear with. Let me sort it out in time. Yeah, let's get rid of that. Is that okay? Right, bear with. Okay, Chris, 30-year-old, 12 years experience. Yeah, that's good, Chris. I'm 58 and I've been doing it for about 36 years now. So, it's loads of fun. It's loads of fun, mate. I wish I'd been a plumber. All the plumbers I know, they're doing really well, or they have done really well over the years. Oh dear. Max, how would you prepare spongy areas of lava and plaster on walls prior to skimming? If it's really spongy, mate, then it needs to come off. It's just too dodgy. If you go over any spongy lava and plaster work, then it's not, the chances of it holding. I mean, it might hold for a while and look okay, but could probably give you issues a bit later on. If the area you're skimming is large and you want to divide the work area up, can you use a line of scrim tape? Now, you want to divide the work area up, can you use a line of scrim tape? Not quite sure what you mean, Bladeboard, about using the scrim tape for dividing the work up into areas. I mean, you don't need to put scrim tape on. I mean, any joints or cracks you've got, put scrim tape over the top of them. Joints wise, obviously you try and cover a biggest area that you can, and if you have to put a joint in it, and just make sure you make the end of that first part neat enough, so when you bring the second coat up to it for your second set, you can get a decent joint in it, because otherwise nothing looks worse on a painted wall than a bad joint between two sets. Cheers, Mozza. Yeah, turn that music down because I can't hear it properly. So whether there's feedback or stuff, I don't know. John, when you're rendering, how do you fix your corner beads, or to get the kick on the bell cast bead? When I'm fixing corner beads on render, I whack the render basically onto the angles first, and then I push my beads into it. Give them a tap, level them up with spirit level, and then leave them well alone until they've properly set. Ideally, if I put my beads on during the scratch coat with render, and I won't touch them again till the following day, so that the beads have gone off nice and solid. So when you're floating up to those and rolling them off, they don't move, which is great. I had years ago in the past stuck some beads on with a bit of bonding, but that's a bit cowboy. Especially when you're rendering outside. Rendering to get the kick on the bell cast bead. The bell cast bead. I mean, you put the gear onto the bottom of the wall. You tap that in. I mean, the bell part of the bottom of the bead should be kind of sticking out. Anyway, like kicking off from the wall. And then when you're laying your top coat on, you lay that into the bottom of the bell cast on it. I hope that makes sense to you, mate. I hope that makes sense. Love brown toast. Love brown bread toast. Sorry, mate. Any thoughts on doing one coat with multi-finish? At least you ain't got a clear block drains as a plasterer. No, that's true, mate. Multi-finish, if you're going by the book, when any finish work you do two coats, mostly because the tight second coat you put on helps to flatten it out, which is what you're after. But if I've come unstuck before because something started to go off rapid, whether it's because the room I'm working in is far too hot in the middle of a summer's day, or the gear's a bit dodgy, rather than it wrecking, I will run a speed skim across it and trowel it up. And if it looks nice and smooth and flat, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I've done that on occasions, or quite a few occasions. I say it's not a by the book thing, but there's nothing wrong if you have to do a one coat on a wall for one reason or another, as long as it doesn't end up rough at the end. Then, or you could do two coats and it could be rough, depending on what your plastering is like. But one coat is absolutely fine if need to be, but it's just not by the book. But then the guys that make the plaster, I mean, they specify I'll use two coats because they want to sell you more plaster. And you chuck so much out at the end of the day if you're knocking up big mixes. Chris, never one coat for another. Yeah, well, Chris, I've done if you can only do one coat and it's rough, then well, what can I say? Bladeboard. How much work is there about generally for plasterers prepared to do small jobs? Probably quite a bit, mate, because quite a few people contact me and sort of say, "Oh, it's only a little job." I mean, sometimes it's not that little, but most plasterers, what they hate doing, including me, is when people have had they've put some new windows in themselves, or they've had an electrician in and there's channels all over the house. The windows need repairing around the edges. Most plasterers don't want to do that. I don't want to do jobs like that. They tend to take longer than it does to do a large area. So there's a lot of potential small job work out there that you can pick up if you're happy to do small jobs at the end of the day. Yeah, the plumbers I know love brown bread toast. Their houses are like mansions. And I mean, they're lovely guys, and what I might earn in a day, a good plumber can earn in half an hour, depending on what it is they're doing. Max, what tools do you use for tight areas, e.g. if architrave is 1 inch, 2 inches adjacent wall? The only thing you can do to get in that small tight gaps around architrave, where you've got the architrave from the door about a half-inch gap, and then the corner is get this little small set of little trowels. They're not trowels as such; they're like kind of filling knives on a funny angle, but you can get them from sort of like probably 1/4 of an inch upwards, and they seem to work. They seem to work fine for me. Again, you can't. The best thing with that is to get the gear on with one of these little trowels in the gap, leave it alone, and as it starts to pull and set, then you can they're much easier to flatten out with the little trowel, and then a little bit of water at the end. Do it again, fine. But yeah, that's all you can do. Ideally, you want to be working up to an architrave, because when customers do take architraves off and want you to plaster, the original plaster's probably already more than flush with the frame. So when you put your extra plaster on top of that and just go to the end of the door frame, when I go to put new architrave back on, it wobbles around. So I tend to ask my customers if they want to put their new architrave on, if they're changing it, and then I will butt my new plaster up to that. Same with skirtings and stuff like that. Just find it makes the job easier at the end of the day. Chris, got taught to rule off reveals, internals and ceilings when skimming. Yeah, anything you can rule off with a rule, mate, is good. With skimming, with any kind of backing coat as well, bondings or brownings. I mean, there's a little gizmo you can make out of a piece of wood and a nail when you're doing a reveal. of a window with bonding to make sure you get a nice square reveal at the end of the day. But obviously putting a nail in a piece of wood and running it up a windowsill, you've got to be careful you don't scratch or cause any damage to the windowsill. But yeah, Chris, rule off when you can rule something off, mate. Then get a rule in there and rule it off every time. My biggest plastering disaster is used. I only had a little bit of PVA left. This is going back a long way, so I watered it down quite a bit. Put a ceiling on. Wasn't working for a builder. Bonded it, or a couple of ceilings. Bonded them. Skimmed them. They looked bloody lovely, and he rang me the next day and they'd fallen down. Basically, the whole lot had just dropped down, and so needless to say, I mean, he supplied the gear, but I did them again for nothing. But yeah, I think there was probably that at that point in my plastering career that I started using neat PVA, and I've never looked back. And I've never had a problem. But yeah, it's probably the worst thing that's happened to me. But it only happened the once. John, hello John. When skimming ceilings, any good tips to get my ceiling line nice and tidy? If you're just doing a ceiling up against the existing wall that's already there, I run a cork bead around once the job's finished. Just gives a nice finish between the finished ceiling that you've done new and the original plaster that's left around the edge. I mean, you should get it not quite nice anyway, because when you're finishing off that edge where your plaster ceiling meets the wall, you should be running a nice thin brush along there when you're troweling it up. And if you do that and it looks great, then leave it at that. But if it looks a teeny bit rough here and there, yeah, run a cork bead around it. It's going to be painted. Obviously make sure it's the paintable cork that you're using. And yeah, I often do that. I mean, if the walls are new as well, then I don't bother. But unless for some reason or another one of the angles has gone a bit dodgy. But yeah, any new ceilings, I finish off around the edges with a nice bit of white decorator's filler. Jan, hello Jan. First time plastering, what did you think about the trade? Well, I went, to be honest, back in 1980, I was a chef. Yeah, I'm that old, man, I'm that old. And a mate of mine that I knew from catering college, he'd become a plasterer in the meantime. I had never seen a plasterer work before. I had no idea what it was like or how it operated. And I went labouring with him for a weekend, and was amazed about the amount of stuff he just whacked on a wall. The biggest thing I'd ever done was fill up a little hole with a bit of filler, and just impressed me. And to me, it looked like just icing a great big cake. And when I was a chef, I was pretty good at icing the old cake. So yeah, I was keen to do that, because cooking for a living, you do get screamed at by those chefs, and it ain't a nice way to spend your career as a chef. So yeah, I couldn't wait to become a plasterer instead. I went labouring after that, and then while I was waiting to try and get an apprenticeship to do the plastering. But yeah, no, loved it. The way you can transform someone's place and the satisfaction you get from it is amazing. But for the first 10 years anyway, after that it's just a job. Yeah, I love brown bread on toast. It's you've got to get a shorter name than that, man. You do live and learn. I mean, there's what on my site it says, like, experience is everything, and it is so much is, whether it's down to kind of customers you've worked for. The first few jobs I had when I was a freshman, you could go on a building site as long as you had a big trowel and said, "Yep, I'm a plasterer." They'd start you there and then start you the next day. The work on sites now is not quite as prevalent as it used to be, not quite as much of it. But I had a lot of one-day jobs where they'd take you on for the day, and they did pay me for the day. I'd give them that, bless them. But then they'd say, "Sorry, mate, got to let you go." You know, you've done a fantastic job, but you've only done one wall, and the guy upstairs has done a whole room. So yeah. Live and learn. Would you use PVA in preference to blue grit? Bladeboard, yeah, I only ever use PVA. I've never used blue grit, yellow grit, red grit, or any other grit. Basically, at the end of the day, if you need some grit, mix some sand into a bit of PVA and use that, and works wonders. I mean, 9 times out of 10, I hardly ever do that. Only on the odd occasion, if there's something I kind of think that really needs a good key to it, chemical and something a bit rough, is when I'll mix a bit of sand in with a bit of PVA. But generally, neat PVA. I mean, I've used just neat PVA on one of those butler sinks, a porcelain sink before, and put render on it, and it stayed. And you think, like, sand and cement on porcelain sink just wouldn't stick, but and that was just stuck with PVA. Neat PVA, I grant you, and it's gone off. It's not tacky, but yeah, PVA is amazing. And I buy the cheapest stuff you can get at B&Q. It's about £10 for a gallon. You can blow a lot on more expensive PVA, but my experience is pointless. But it's your money, so at the end of the day, and the blue grits and stuff, yeah, I've got no preference for them at all. Jan, what do you think easier now? What with the plastering was easier now or then, Jan? If that's what you're asking, plastering's always been a hard job. Things like the speed skim, they make it easier for you on your wrists and your arms and your shoulders and all the rest of it, because you're doing a lot less trowel motions when you're using speed skims and metal blade speed skims and what have you. But yeah, so I'd say it's easier now. I mean, you could get a fantastic finish then with just a hook and a trowel, just like one Marshalltown trowel. You didn't have to use all these. I mean, there weren't flexi trowels and stuff when I started out, but they are good. I mean, I love all the new gear. It works a treat, helps me out, and with some of the flexible trowels, as long as you don't use them too soon when you're doing a set. If you're using them right at the end, they can give you a lovely smooth finish on your plaster. PVA with sand in is the same. Yeah. Paul, which trade would you prefer to do if you weren't a plasterer? Oh, mate. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, although I said I should have been a plumber because they seem to earn more money, I don't think I always wanted to be a plumber at the end of the day. The other trades, bricklaying, again, can be a good job, but it's always outside. Yeah, I mean, the thing I like about being a plasterer is working indoors, basically, at the end of the day. Because, yeah, in the winter, no, forget it. I mean, I don't really do. I have recently, for a customer that I've done a lot of work for, I've done some rendering for them about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and but generally I don't do outside work anymore because the weather's too unpredictable. I mean, this time of year it's obviously bad and it gets too cold, and if it goes below 2 degrees you shouldn't be putting any kind of render up outside anyway. But yeah, no, I just stick to inside work, and because most of my work now is domestics. I've worked for so many builders and building companies in the past that I'm at that age where you can earn good money on domestic jobs, and they're just easier. And you do a job, you get finished, you get paid, and you're sorted, which is good. Best way to break in a new Marshalltown trowel is sand and cement work, John. I mean, you can obviously get bit of sandpaper to them and get the corners. You can nip the corners off, but you've got to be careful doing that with a new trowel. But basically, either sanding it down and or doing a lot of sand and cement work. Mozza, I'm 64. Well done, Mozza. I'm still at it. I'll probably still be at it when I'm 80 or 90, mate, I think, as well. Probably you and me both. Worked myself up to a 16-metre square ceiling with a labourer handing me up plaster. I can only just do a bag of multi within 50 minutes. I have to add water to make it in 50 minutes. How can Oh, that's what it stops there, mate. I can't see Mozzo. I can't see all the rest of your chat's not come up on the thing. Yeah, it's like anything else, Matt. Was the older you get, you kind of like. I mean, I don't like killing myself, but if I've got a fairly straightforward bit of wall to do, I'm quite happy to knock up 2 bags still, and I managed to get it bashed out. The speed skim helps with being able to level your first coat off nice and quickly, so you can whack a bit more on. Whereas I might have gone, before I used a speed skim, I might have gone back to the beginning just to make sure everything had a bit of another quick trowel over before I carried on putting on more gear, which obviously takes more time and you can't get so much covered. But yeah, that's what I did basically to get like 2 bag one knocked out. But 158 now. By the time I'm 64, mate, I might just think, yeah. I mean, I'm quite happy to just do 1 bag at a time. But if you're doing quite a big job and you've got a fixed price for it, I just like to get them done as quick as I can. Any reason to use a speed skim as opposed to a hand spatula? A bit more comfortable. Yeah, I mean the small speed skim, the sort of the 450mm. If you're going to buy one of those, you might as well just use a hand spatula with the just with a handle. But I use a 900 speed skim, and it's just because of the length of it. It covers a much larger area, and you can get like a 1800 or 1200 and 1800mm speed skims. So if you've got a nice clear flat wall or ceiling, and you're going across with that, then yeah, you just cover such a large area and smooths it out a lot quicker, which is the only reason for using them. But if you're only covering small areas, then just use an ordinary spatula. Yeah, end of the day, if you're more comfortable with it. Cheers. Is that miles per hour MP8? Yeah, thanks for that, mate. What kind of pressure do you apply when initially spreading your plaster? I'm a DIYer and can get very good results, but I feel like I might be pressing too hard early on. I suppose that's something that just comes with experience of keep doing more work. As long as you've whatever you've got on the hook, you can get onto the wall and you're spreading it out as far as it'll go, without spreading it too tight. Then that's absolutely fine. But when it comes to pressure's like how much pressure you put on a trowel is a difficult thing to teach, even on a one-to-one with somebody, let alone if you're learning online. But yeah, it's literally just a case of keep practicing. But yeah, cheers for the comment, man. Chris, 60 square metre ceiling is the biggest I've done on my own. Yeah, no, that's cool, Chris. Nice one. Yeah, I mean, I haven't had a labourer for years. Obviously, I've got a whisk and I've got stilts, and you can cover a large area. If it's a case of how quick you get the stuff on after you've knocked it up, and if it's a perfect temperature in a room, it's not too hot, it's not too cold, and you bash your mix up at just the right thickness for if you're going on the plasterboard, say for example. Then yeah, it's amazing what you can cover. Obviously, I'd never try and mix up more than a 2-bag mix, especially not working on my own. If I had a labourer, I might do ongoing mixes. So as one wall's going off, I might get him to start up the next mix and lay on another wall. But since I've done domestics and they're small compared to the kind of work you might do on a site, or if you're working in a massive house that needs to get bashed out. 2 bags is the most I'd knock up, and whatever 2 bags of multi-finish will cover is as much as I'll do in one hit. John, when doing ceilings, do you always use your speed skim? I do now, mate, yeah. Before I had one, I just did, I think a lot of my intros on my videos before I was using a speed skim, and I'm just basically going up and down with a trowel in one direction and then the other. But it is more wrist work. And obviously you're going over stuff a lot more, whereas when you're using a speed skim, you just get an area covered quicker. And because the plastic one on your first coat opens up the texture of the finish, it's kind of good and bad. It's kind of good that it opens up the finish, so the finish can dry a little bit quicker. So it's kind of swings and roundabouts. You're flattening it out quicker by using a plastic speed skim, but because it's opening the texture of the finish, it is helping the finish to start to set a little bit quicker. I have discovered since using one. I love brown toast. What stage is it best to use a plastic speed skim as opposed to a metal blade? The plastic one you would use literally off the way I do it. As soon as I've laid on my first coat, I'll grab a plastic speed skim and I will rule it off as wet as it might be, which is great. As I said, it opens up the surface of the plaster. If you use a metal blade on plaster that wet, it will blister and it won't be good because the metal blade draws the water to the surface, and you don't want that. Well, you especially don't want it early on. You don't want that happening until you're starting to put water on a wall to trowel it and give it hard trowels. Yeah, so metal blade speed skims are for almost for that troweling up at the end, and only use the plastic ones for ruling off. But as I say, you can rule off straight away with a plastic plastic speed skim blade. Sorry. Max speed skim for me seems to make first coat pick up faster. Yeah. So many small ridges left show through the second coat. Yeah, you should be. It does, as I said, because it opens up the plastic blade of the speed skim, opens up the texture of the finish. Then it does go off quicker, but you do need to make sure that you've got it fairly flat before you get your second coat on there. I mean, it should be wet enough your first coat to flatten out when the second coat goes on, because the whole idea of the second coat is to flatten out the first coat if the first coat's not completely flat, which it won't be, not in my experience anyway. I mean, my second coat always goes on while my first coat is still not soaking wet but still wet. I don't let a coat start to go off and then put a fresh second coat on. I mix up what I've got left for my large mix and use that for my second coat. But it does go off rapid, so you need to go for it if you're going to do that. If you give the customer a written price, do you get them to sign it to stop them not paying? Also, how do you deal with bad payers? I rarely come across bad payers. I don't get them to sign anything because they'll just think you're having a laugh. I do tell them that the money becomes due on completion of the job, so it's not sort of like send me an invoice and I'll pay you in a month's time. It's as soon as I've finished, I expect to get paid. Most of my payments, I get them to do a bank transfer into my bank, which just saves messing about with checks and stuff like that, unless they insist on paying you cash. But most people are quite happy to just do a bank transfer. The only time you might get a problem with someone paying is if you've either done a rough job, or you've got plaster on their carpet, or you've damaged their decor somewhere else in their house, or they're rare, but there are people that are set out not to pay or to pay the proper rate from the start. But thankfully, they're so few and far between. But yeah, so generally, mate, if you do a decent job and you keep the place clean, then you shouldn't have any trouble getting paid. If you do, you've just been really unlucky. But you can tend to, over the years, you tend to get a sense of the customer when you go to price up a job. If you get a bad gut feel about the customer, or if the customer tells you exactly how long they expect it to take you, then I generally don't go back, or I don't bother quoting. Bladeboard, when's the soonest you can skim after using PVA? Is it possible to leave it too long? No, you can. For me personally, I like the PVA to be dry to the touch. A lot of guys say, "I will put the PVA on. Once it gets tacky, you can skim that." I have done that. I've also done it when it was a bit too tacky, and the skim at some point, especially in the winter, doesn't happen so much in the summer. The skim has started to slide because the PVA is kind of slipping on the wall, and the weight of the finish takes it with it, so which isn't great. You can leave PVA to dry completely and then skim over it. I've said on another one of these, one of my subscribers actually that I've done, that did a big job for in his bungalow, and he went around and he PVA'd everything for me first. So when I went there, each room I went into, I could just stick my beads up and skim. So they'd all been pre-PVA'd. The PVA was bone dry in all of them, and this was during the summer, and they all came out lovely as they generally do. So yes, mate, PVA. I prefer it to be dry. If I can PVA something the day before, I'll do that. Using the same mix for second coat. Yes, Chris. I always 9 times out of 10 I'm using the same mix for my second coat. But as I said, it goes off rapid once you start putting water in a mix that's going off. But I have done that, and if I need a little bit more and it's thickening up again, I've watered down the same mix up to 3 times. And obviously each time you add a bit more water to it, the faster it goes off. So you need to be able to keep a control on it. But yeah, that's how I was taught to do it years ago. You knocked up a big mix, and your second coat, because you're not using so much gear and because it's going on tight, you just whack a bit of water in what you've got left over, spin it up and get that on for your second coat, and the whole thing goes off at the same speed, rather than having to wait an extra 45 minutes to an hour because you put a brand new coat of gear over the old one. Yeah, Chris, I would definitely recommend, if you can handle the speed of stuff goes off, using the same mix for the second coat. Do you ever patch up lava and plaster? I did, and someone was asking me if I'd had any issues in the past. Someone had it was like a wooden lintel over their window, and it had the lathes on it, and I thought, well, I'll just clean the lathes off, and I'll put bonding on them, and I think I PVA'd them as well. Pushed the bonding in, I thought, well, that's not going to go anywhere. Put a bead on it, skimmed it all up, looked lovely, and but as the wood got wet and dry, it obviously twisted a bit and the whole thing cracked up. So I went back there and said, yeah, I should have plasterboarded it in the first place. So I'll tend not to, if I've got a patch that needs patching up, the plaster's normally thick enough, I will put a piece of plasterboard onto the lathes in the patch and then plaster over that plasterboard, because you can you can plaster onto the lathes, but it's not worth the risk of possible cracking happening, because the plasters today, the Carlite stuff you use compared to the gear they used to use, it's got no flexibility in it at all, our new stuff. So if the wood moves whatsoever, the plaster will crack. So whack a bit of plasterboard on a patch first of lava and plaster, and then put your plaster over that. Next, would you ever skim over lava and plaster ceiling, or always overboard? Yeah, is that the same question then? Really, if the ceiling's been pulled down and all the lathes are still up there, I will plasterboard over the lathes. I would never go over an old lath ceiling with any kind of Carlite gypsum plaster, because one, it just it would be quicker to plasterboard it. I mean, once the ceiling's down, and obviously you can plasterboard straight over the lathes, that's not an issue. Give it a skim and you're done. Whereas if you mess about with having to bond the lathes first, and then you wouldn't want to set that the same day, and say any movement in the timbers or the lathes, and you could get some massive issues. So don't ever plaster over old lathes. If you're in some old building that they're doing up and they're doing it the old traditional way, but they'll be using a lime and mortar mix on the lathe ceiling like they used to, with a horsehair in it and all that stuff, it won't be a Carlite type finish going on, because the old gear is a little bit flexible, but the stuff we use now is not flexible at all. Clark had a bad plaster job done and then painted. Can you skim over new paint? You can skim over new paint, Clark. Yeah, it's not a problem. It needs to have a coat of PVA over it first. Leave that to go off, and then yeah, it can be skimmed again. I mean, I probably wouldn't skim it the day after it's been painted. But if the paint's had a good while to dry, it can be PVA'd over and skimmed again. And because skim goes on quite tight, it shouldn't cause you a problem. It's just a pity to have to go over something that's already been plastered once. But when you get a plasterer in, unless you're getting them on recommendation, you got no way of knowing whether they're any good or not. That's a good reason to have your own website when you are a plasterer, or have like a YouTube channel where you can put your work on there and people can see what they're getting at the end of the day, if they haven't been personally recommended by someone else. Chris, do much damp proofing? Only from the viewpoint, if someone's had damp proofing done in the past, a company might say to me, "Oh, we've injected the walls. We need you to put a waterproof sand and cement up, so we can give the customer their guarantee." I've done a lot of jobs for people that have got damp issues. Obviously, I'm not a damp proofer injector guy, so I'll say, look, I can put a waterproof render on your wall, and I've done quite a lot of that for people because obviously it's cheaper than having the injecting done. And again, I've had no issues. No one's come back to me to say that the damps come through, even though I put waterproof sand and cement render up. I don't do that much of it, but I've looked at one this week actually. They got quite bad damp, and they've taken it right back off to the bricks, but all the way up the wall. So I'm going to do the whole wall right up to the ceiling, just to be on the safe side. But yeah, damp proofing for me will just be a case of a waterproof sand and cement going up. Scratch coat, I'm using about a 3-to-1. It's quite a strong mix, but from a scratch coat, if I'm doing a smooth render, I might put the teeniest bit of waterproofer in it, which also works as a plasticizer, and some lime as well. If I'm doing pebble dashing, as you might have seen on one of my videos, if you're doing any kind of pebble dashing, your first scratch coat needs to be absolutely full of waterproofer. So then your second coat hangs about, which is great for chucking stones in it and they stick in rather than bounce off. But of course, if you're going to rub the wall up and you've got a load of damp proofing, a load of waterproofer in your coat, and your first scratch coat, then the top coat's going to take forever to go off, and yeah, you don't want to be waiting all day for the gear to go to start to pull in. What makes a great plasterer? Lots of practice, Norman. Lots of practice, mate. Lots of practice, and keeping people's houses clean. Turning up when you say you're going to turn up. If you can't make it to a customer's house, give them a ring, drop them a line. And a lot of people sort of will say to me, "Oh, if I just get a bloke to come around and give me a quote, I'll give them the job." But they ring quite a few people, and often people just don't come and look. I don't know why that is. What were old plasters like Carlite and Browning like to use? Carlite, yeah, because of when it was just Carlite finish, there was no multi-finish. I can't remember now. It's been that long since, I don't think you can buy just Carlite anymore. Browning, any kind of finish you put on top of Browning comes out absolutely silky smooth when it's done, better than it does on top of hardware or on top of bonding. Don't know why. It must be a chemical thing, but Browning was a pain to work with, because before the electric whisk come out, you'd whack a bath, tin bath, plastic bath, tin bath then actually, full of water. You put your bag of Browning on the top. Bonding, when you mix that in, it sinks and it mixes easy. When you put a bag of Browning on top of water, it floats on the top like a boat, and you have quite a hard time with a rake and a shovel to get it to mix. But yeah, and Browning's only it's okay on bricks, but it's rubbish on. It won't stick to concrete or anything like that. So you have to put bonding on concrete and Browning on bricks. But now most people who use just bonding or hardwall, and that's why you don't see a lot of browning. Or I don't even know if you can still get browning. It's been that long since I've used any. Eddie, hi Eddie, how you doing, mate? I purchased a set of stilts. Oh, mate, well done. I did your first ceiling on Love and Milk. Brilliant, mate. Are you already 6'2" without them on? It is quite close to some of the lower ceilings with the stilts, but too high to reach from the floor. No, well done, Eddie. Yeah, you got used to them pretty quick there, mate, because I think you was a bit worried as to whether or not you'd get the hang of them. But no, stilts, once you get used to them, yeah, they're fantastic. Because prior to that, you'd have to knock up a great big scaffold across the floor, or have planks going across ladders, and it's just a pain. With stilts, as you've probably just discovered, mate, you chuck them on, get the stuff up there, and get it done. Take them off, and you can crack on with the walls. If you're doing the walls as well. But yeah, well done, Eddie, top man. Manny, hi Manny. Yeah, quick question about the speed skim. When do you use it exactly? I use a plastic blade speed skim as soon as I've put my first coat on, to basically level it all out as quickly as I possibly can. So the idea with any kind of finish when you're putting it on, any kind of plaster, but especially finish, is to get it on the wall as quickly as possible. Doesn't really matter what it looks like. And obviously with a speed skim, when you do that in the past, then you'd have to go over it again with your trowel to start to take some of the lines out. But with the speed skim, plastic blade one, you can whack your gear on there quick as you like, run the plastic speed skim across it straight away, or that's what I do, and it levels it all off. You might get a little bit of a ridge at the top and the bottom of your speed skim, but you want to get at least the 900mm speed skim. The short ones, it's not worth using one of them. You might as well be using the trowel. But the longer ones, and on the plastic, you can curve the ends. You can kind of cut them off a bit with some tin snips and give them a bit of a sand, so you get much less of them. Obviously, if the sharp corners there, it will dig in. But if you curve the corners off, which is what most guys do with a new plastic blade on a speed skim, yeah, they're great for that. Great for that. Okay, to board over. You can plasterboard over anything, mate. A wood chip, and then just skim that. I would never actually plaster over wood chip, but I've known people that have done it. But the chances of it all falling down are really good. But yeah, you can plasterboard over any kind of wallpaper or paint that's up there, because it's all going to be covered up with the plasterboard, and then just skim that. No problem at all. Norman, right, when is the next plastering video? I was working on it today, mate. It's one I did quite a while ago, and there's been so much messing about in general, and obviously working hard, getting the time to knock them up, put them together and do the editing. But I've been working on one tonight, which I'm hoping, I don't think I'll get it actually finished tonight, but it'll be up tomorrow. That's doing an internal rendering where they've had damp, funnily enough, knocking it all off, putting the waterproof sand and cement back, and then skimming it. But that's coming out. That's the next video. Will probably be up tomorrow. Overboard. No. Yeah. That stair one. I didn't do it that long ago when I'm doing the stairwell wall. And even now, when I look back on it and think, how did I manage to cover that amount of area and not break a swear? I think I just must have been a good day for me that day. As I say, because I don't put any additives or stuff into my plaster to try and hold it back. But yeah, on a good day, if you've been doing it for long enough and the wind's blowing in the right direction, you can bash a load of stuff out. Which is good, because the more you can bash out, the more money you can earn. If the work's there, obviously. Yeah, Chris, the stilts, as I said, I've been asked about them before, and for me they took a little while to get used to. You have to put them on, practice kind of walking along, holding against the wall. But they freaked me out a bit. I could just about walk in to start with, and I thought there's no way I'm going to be able to hold a halt on a trowel and put plaster above my head while I'm balancing on a set of these stilts. But it's surprising how quick you do get the hang of them, and a bit further up there, Eddie, he was toying with it. He's bought some, and he seems to have got the knack of it straight away. Dear. Yes, I definitely recommend buying stilts. Though in a lot of cases, stilts for laying on. I was going to say, because with the really long speed skims, we can get a handle attachment for those now, and they're good for rolling off the ceiling. But I still like to whack my stilts on them to get the gear on and up there. Needs a new mixing drill. Can you recommend one? The Refiner. I've had, in 35 years, I've had 2 Refiner whisks. So I'm still on the second one. Got through loads of paddles, obviously, because they wear down, especially when you're doing sand and cement. Because I mix sand and cement with my Refiner. Because I can do a big mix in one of those big buckets, as long as you put the water in first, and then the cement and lime, if you're using lime, and then the sand, not the other way around. Don't put the sand and cement in and then the water if you're going to use a whisk and mix it up in a bucket. But a lot of jobs where I'd always be kind of dragging a cement mixer there. Now it's I just knock it all up in with my Refiner. But I think my first or second one, I think the brushes went, but you can buy brushless Refiners now. You can buy you can buy battery operated ones, but they're an arm and a leg. But Refiner are the ones that they use at the hire shop. If you hire one from the hire shop, it'll be a Refiner, because this is so well built and they last for so long. So that's my recommendation, as well as Chris's. How long are your sets taking at the Mo? Are you still using the same mix? A couple of hours for each of my sets, really, from start to finish. Might be slightly over when you're finishing up with the hard troweling, but that is me using the same mix for my second coat by thinning it down and then whacking that over the top as the second coat. About 2 hours. Hi Shabir, what do you think of the Refiner Plastiflex? Not used it, mate. I've heard some good things about the Refiner. Another friend of mine who's got another plasterer on here, he's got about 30,000 subscribers, so I've got a lot of catching up to do. I think he might have done a review on that recently, and I'm pretty sure he's keen. He wasn't at first. He said it took a while to get the hang of it, because they're still quite stiff. But I haven't got a personal opinion from using one, because I haven't used one. How much water do you typically use for a bag of multi-finish? Find the recommended. Whatever amount you use. It's for most bags of multi-finish, talking about just over a bucket. One of your normal builder's black bucket. It's more than that. But not a lot more. But the bags, they haven't always got the exact amount of plaster in, and I've used exactly the same amount before for 2 different mixes, and one was perfect and the other one was too runny, and there was obviously a bit less plaster in the bag. So yes, not a lot of point in going by the directions on the bag, but it's just over. I tend to put one whole lot of one bucket of water in there first, then make just a little bit of the second one, whack the whole bag in, give it a mix. If it's still a little bit too thick, then you can add just a little bit more of the second one, but it doesn't normally take more than a bucket and a half at the very most, unless you've got a really generous bag of plaster. We finish. Clark, no worries, Clark. Yeah, no, I've never. I think I might have skimmed over wood chip once, but it was for my brother-in-law, and he said it was like rock and he couldn't get it off, which wood chip often is, especially on a ceiling. And I said, well, if it all falls down, mate, it's down to you. And that did work, but generally I won't do it, because that moisture from the plaster has to go somewhere. Basically, it soaks into any kind of paper. So if you're going over wood chip, which is mostly paper, let's face it, and all that water's soaking into it, there's a good chance of a big bubble of it dropping down if the whole lot doesn't drop down. But not a good idea to skim over wood chip, though some guys do, but a bit risky in my opinion. What's that? Chris Shabir. I'll have to look that up, mate. I haven't even heard of that one. What's your everyday trowel? My everyday laying on trowels are Marshalltown. They're kind of industry standard, been around forever. They're a quality trowel. I don't know if they're... I mean, the first Marshalltowns I bought, they weren't even stainless steel. They were just ordinary steel. You had to keep them kind of oiled and nice and clean. The good thing about the ones that weren't stainless steel is they wear in really quick because they go a bit rusty, and you rub the old rust off with sanding it off, or when you're doing sand and cement work, and they'd wear in a lot quicker than the stainless steel because it's harder and it's not rusting as such. They take longer to wear in. But yeah, Marshalltown's the trowel you want to buy if you're seriously looking at doing some serious plastering. Eddie, you've got a large Artex ceiling to do. Do you recommend the extra time gear? Have you used it? No, as I said, Eddie, I've never used any extra time stuff. I think once I tried using a retarder in my plaster, it just didn't work for me. And I've seen other guys use it on videos, and it hasn't worked for them either. So yeah, I mean, you've probably watched the one where where I'm bonding over an Artex ceiling and skimming it. Apart from me neat PVA up there, and especially I can't remember if that ceiling was skimmed the same day as it was bonded, in which case I went straight over it. And you've got a bit more pulling in time. If you're bonding it first, mate, and you're going to skim it the next day, then give it a really good coat of PVA and let it dry completely before you put a skim on it, Eddie. And yeah, that'll give you a bit more time. If you've left it a whole day and it's only got a bit of a thin coat of PVA on it, it'll still pull in really quick. Which obviously you don't want. You want it to hang about as long as it possibly can. So yes, but I wouldn't bother messing about with any extra time things. I mean, a couple of people have said that it's good, but once I've had a bad, I tried it and it didn't work, and I haven't bothered since. And for me, I haven't needed to, thankfully. Hello, Norman. Cheers, Norman. Appreciate it, mate. Yeah, and you, mate. You take care, Norman, and. Yeah, did I give you the number? Give us a bell next time, mate, because I need to test whether the phone line into this live stream works or not. But cheers for now, mate. 18 to 24, which they're made from 9. Sorry, what are those? The stilts are 18, 24, which they're made from 9 lowest settings. Yeah, the stilts you can buy a smaller set of stilts, but I found they're too small, and I don't think they adjust up. And if they do, if you've got a slightly higher than an average size ceiling, they don't go up quite high enough. But I'm assuming you had a look at the shorter ones that they do, Eddie. But I mean, I rarely put my bigger ones up higher. But as you say, if you're really tall anyway, there has been quite a few ceilings where I've worn my stilts, but I have had to crouch while I'm doing the work, which isn't ideal, but it's better than not being able to use the stilts. Blaine Gray, yes, yeah, Blaine, yeah, he's a lovely guy, Blaine, brilliant plasterer. Martin, when would you use 9.5mm plasterboard instead of 12? Want me to be honest, Martin? Nearly all the time, mate. I've got a box built on top of my motor, which I can get about 10 of those in. It was a purpose-built box, literally for doing that. Obviously, you use the thicker ones. You can't get as many in there. And I've used 9.5 for most of my jobs. I mean, unless depending on this kind of how big a ceiling is and whether there's any issues or you're worried about it, then I would use the 12 mil, but rather than the 9.5. But most of my jobs well, I use 9.5. I don't get any sagging or anything. You only get sagging if there's not enough joists. If there's not enough joists, you should be talking to the customer about it anyway and saying, even if you used 12mm boards over this, they might dip because you lack a joist. But that's not normally the case. Most joists are 15, 18 inches apart, and so 9.5 balls okay. I mean, technically, some people go, "Oh, I shouldn't use boards that thin," but then what's the point of making them? Do you ever find the different types of plasterboard different to skim over, like fire rated as opposed to normal grade? No, not really, mate. Plasterboard, the surfaces of it, the way stuff goes off, is generally the same. The only time you might have an issue with the plasterboard is if it's been out. If it's been somewhere really, really dry, or it's been in direct sunlight for a long period of time, you can get an issue where your finish goes off a lot quicker than it should. That doesn't often happen, but it can happen. If you're ever nervous about that, then there's nothing stopping you PVAing a plasterboard. But at the end of the day, it's not something you really want to do because you're not meant to have to. But if you know a board is really dry and you're worried about it, PVA it. But other than that, they're more or less the same to plaster over, whatever type of board it is. Max, what do you do for skimming walls that are solid but with cracks everywhere? Skim every crack. It's an easier way. Over most of the cracks, when I'm skimming a wall, if there are cracks in it, I will put the fiberglass tape over the majority of the cracks. If there's really fine cracks coming off of the other cracks, I won't put a bit of tape over every single little hairline crack because you could be there forever. And I've never had an issue when I've gone over walls that have had cracks in that are still solid but cracked, as you say. They tend to cover up no problem and stay sound. I have experimented in my own house where I had a really dodgy bit of ceiling and I literally crisscrossed because I was being lazy because it was my house, crisscrossed fiberglass tape over it, and it did have a bit of movement in it prior to that. Stuck some screws through the tape into the joist above, put a bit more tape on, and then I skimmed over it. And to this day, it's been absolutely fine. But I'd never do it in a customer's house, and I wouldn't recommend it. But yeah, that's the only thing you can do with cracked walls, as long as they're solid. If you can punch a wall and it doesn't fall down, I tend to say to a customer, then it's fine to skim over. Cheers, Bladeboard. Appreciate that. Appreciate that a lot. Email me for the number, some of you guys, and ring into the. Well, we're going to try this like ringing into the studio, so we've got someone else's voice other than just mine, because I like it, but other people might get fed up with it. So. And it'd be good to be able to have ask me a few questions over the phone. I can answer back, and it all comes through a speaker and gets fed back through the computer. So it doesn't. So it should sound like you're here with me, and that might be good. So any of you guys out there, drop me an email at erictheplasterer@gmail.com or via my website, which is the same name as my YouTube channel, plasterer.org.uk, and request a number, and I'll send it to you. And the next live stream, try ringing in, and we'll see if it works. And yeah, I look forward to that. Do you use bonding agent on moisture resistant plasterboard? No, not really, Chris. I mean, you can do. I mean, you can put, as I said earlier, you can put a bonding agent over the top of any surface that you want to be on the safe side. But generally, I'll just go straight over even that without putting anything on it first. Do you recommend 2 coats or one of multi after applying bonding coat to an Artex ceiling? Oh, you still do Eddie. You still do a double coat. When you go and buy the book anyway. If you're struggling to do a big ceiling because of the size of it and you don't want to put a joint in it and you've bonded it, if you boiled it the previous day, as I've said, if you give it a good coat of neat PVA, let it dry completely, and you hit the whole thing with one coat. Again, it's not by the book, but if you can get a thick enough one coat on there to rule it off with a speed skim to the point that when you're troweling it up, it's smooth and it's flat and it looks great, then it's not going anywhere. It's not going to come down. It'll look just as great as a 2-coat ceiling once it's painted. So I'm not recommending do that because I'm just so used to flattening out the second coat more when the first coat rather when I'm putting that second coat on. But it can help you do a larger area than you might be used to doing if you just do the one coat. But as I said, I can get slated for saying that. But as I said, I've been plastering for so many years, and I have done that on so many occasions, and I've never had a problem. So what do I care? Bit of an odd question. What do you typically eat during a workday? If I've taken any lunch, whatever that is. Probably just sandwiches at the end of the day, or if I'm trying to stay fit or healthy, have some chicken and salad and what have you. But I do love a bit of bread and butter, which isn't great. Especially over the lockdown period, I put on quite a bit of weight because I used to, before the lockdown, I used to go to the gym 3 times a week, and I'm not quite as strong a plasterer as I used to be. Well, it's not affecting me plastering, but me pull-ups are suffering. But yeah, you do need to have something for lunch, because if you don't have I don't have a break as such. I tend to just sit down for a minute, shove a sandwich in, maybe have some coffee or a cold drink, and then just crack on. Because you want to get, if you're doing a fixed price job for someone, you just want to get the job done, or I do anyway. So I will have something to eat because it does give you that extra boost of energy to do the afternoon part of your day. Max, on corner beads over an exposed edge of plasterboard, does the skin pick up really fast? Can have issues on reveals. Exposed edge. Yeah, you can. If you've got a bead over the edge, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. You can, if that's causing you a problem, Max, put some PVA over the open edge of the plasterboard, or whatever stage you want to during the job. If that sets, then the PVA on the edge, then you shouldn't have an issue with it pulling too tight on that area when you've got the bead on there. Alright, just what I'm going to do now, guys, I'm just going to pop over to the hang on. Here we go. Let me just turn this sound down. Okay, speed skim. I said I was going to do a recommendation on the channel for stuff, or a tool review anyway. This is a nice new one. The biggest problem I found with the with the speed skim is getting it out of the box, which you'll see as this video goes on. And be careful when you're using the wife's best knife to open your box, mate, as well, if you buy a speed skim, because or the girlfriend, because you won't be happy. Speed skims, I was looking at, I've forgotten what I paid for this particular one, but this 900mm one was £47, which I thought, well, that's great. And then when I did buy a metal a metal 900, that was £74. So the metal blade ones are more expensive than the plastic blade ones, but you can, that blue blade there, you can replace those, and they do come in cheaper. I think for the 900 the replacement blade was 30 quid, so it's still the major part of the price of buying a whole speed skim. But the metal ones are better. Although you're paying £74 for the metal bladed speed skin, the replacement metal blade is £28. So that's a better replacement price than the plastic price. But you're looking at what we've got here. If you wanted the pole attachment, because you can attach a pole to these for mostly, obviously, if you're doing a ceiling and you want to take it across the ceiling. These ones are a bit small. It's probably best to have a slightly longer, the next size up, speed skim, to attach a pole to it and roll your ceiling off. But they're the 1800mm. They're a plastic one. They're coming at £79. The pole attachment to attach any pole, decorator's pole, to the speed skim handle comes in about £26. I jotted these prices down. And if you want a 1200 metal blade speed skim, you're looking at £85 to buy that. This is including the VAT, and more or less 40 quid to replace the metal blade on a 1200. They do a 1800mm plastic speed skim. I don't know if they do a metal one in that size, because I've been looking but I can't find it anyway. So yeah, I probably wouldn't use a metal bladed 1800mm speed skim anyway. I mean, the more sizes you can, because these go smaller, go down to like 600mm and 450mm. They're if you can afford to have a little collection of them with different sizes, plastic blades and metal blades, then you're laughing. But yeah, I think this particular one in this video doesn't look that nice anymore. Because even if you do obviously clean them really carefully when you've got them brand new, but when you're doing a lot of work and you tend to put the thing to one side, you think, oh, I should have wiped that off sooner. And you do get a kind of, I don't know what it is, but you do get a kind of a layer of plaster that will somehow, often you wash them off, that will build up on the back of your trowel and on the speed skim as well. So but they're yeah, no, they're pretty good bit of care at the end of the day, if you can afford to splash out on them. If yeah, if you're doing a bit of DIY stuff, it's probably worth. Depends how much plastering you think you might be doing, whether it's worth spending the money on one. But as you say, if you're going to use a smaller one, then you could get away with just using the the much smaller one, or just using the spatula that's got a handle, rather than buy something this long or buy a very short speed skim. That one, bear with. Yeah, back in the room. Okay. Well, for some reason I've lost my live chat. Oh no, you're back again, I think. Eddie, I tend to just use the plastic speed skim. Do you use the plastic then the steel after? That's a new question, Eddie, isn't it? Because my stream looked like it stopped there for a second. Yeah, I use the plastic speed skim first to trowel off my first coat, to level it off straight away. I don't use the metal one until I'm basically getting to a troweling up stage with water on that last coat. Then I'll use the metal blade on that and just use it like a very big trowel. Yeah. Still after the plaster is picked up rather than the steel trowel. Oh, I will always use the trowel to finish it off, like the flexi trowel. I wouldn't bother going back over it with a Marshalltown after I've gone over it with a metal bladed speed skim, but I will take a flexi trowel over it just to make sure you've really done a pucker job. If you're good enough with a long metal bladed speed skim, then you might get away with leaving the finish that will look fine once it's painted, but it's not something I've wanted to risk to this point, so I'll always finish it off then with the flexi trowel, just to get a nice silky smooth finish then. Hi Jania. Does your plastic speed skim leave lines on the edges? Yeah, even I say when you buy them new, they've got sharp corners on them, but you can cut those off carefully with some tin snips and give them a bit of a sanding to round them off, and then you get much less of a groove. Well, you hardly get any groove at all, but you can still get a slight groove, especially if the plaster is really wet. But you should go across left to right, from the bottom up, from the top down, and getting over the wall. And it's when you're putting the second coat on, really, Junior, is when you're taking those lines out, because the stuff's starting to set. With any plaster, whether it's the first coat or the second coat, any lines you're going to get, they're only going to start. You can only start to get those out once the gear is starting to go off. Mistake a lot of DIYers make is they try and get as many lines out of the plaster while it's still soaking wet, and once you start doing that and messing about with it, that's when it starts to blister or just goes completely wrong. Has a terrible effect on the on the plaster. I hope that helps, Junior. Max, my plastic spree scheme came with rounded it. Well, yeah. Well, I say square. They are slightly rounded, but you can round them off quite a bit. So rather than being a kind of a little curve, they're more of a curvy curve. if that's a description. Dear. But yeah, so they don't come with sharp corners, but they're sharper than they're sharper than they would be after you've like curved them off. But you've got, obviously, if you're going to cut them off with a pair of tin snips, just take off a little bit at a time and then sand the curve with some sandpaper before you use it on the wall. But yeah, but be careful not to wreck the speed skin by chopping off too much. Oh dear. Yeah, I don't know if any of you guys saw that that video on the bottom of the screen. There was when I did an interview with the people off the news. They were asking about fly tipping and stuff, and this is basically me having a moan about the fact that we can't take waste to any of the tips anymore, trade waste, because they won't take it, and you kind of think, well, if they won't take the gear, what am I meant to do with it? I mean, I've never fly tipped, and I wouldn't. And people that do fly tip generally would fly tip regardless. But I see it didn't help that all the tips I used to go to, where you go on a weigh bridge and you'd pay whatever the minimum amount was, 30 quid, 40 quid, and they'd let you dump all your plasterboard, didn't matter. But now the tips, they've still got weigh bridges, a lot of them, but it's sort of like, no, sorry mate, no, you can't bring that in here. They say, well, I'm willing to pay. And they, no, we don't take it. Personally, I think it's to do with their recycling record. It looks good that how much they recycle, because they don't take trade waste. If they took trade waste, because it has to be included in the figures, it just looks like their recycling is rubbish. So that's why I think they've stopped doing it. But yeah, I have to. At one point, I had a permanent skip. Luckily enough, I've got enough room on the front of my drive to put a skip on it. But it's like, it was there. I had a skip there for a year. Just kept swapping them over because prior to that, I was because customer expects you to take the rubbish away 9 times out of 10. Because that's the way it always used to be. Of course, you could have a debate with them about, I'll knock a bit off if you get rid of the rubbish. But you can have quite a bit of leftover hard plaster that you haven't used at the end of a set. You've got to dump. And yeah, so I was doing that basically. Yeah, and it's become a pain. And that's what that interview is about. On there's me having a moan and then saying, but yeah, I've looked into it, and Epsom, Malden, Sutton, and all the ones near me, and you can't take your waste there, not unless it's disguised in a car. But you go there in any kind of van, or they'll let you in, they'll send you straight back out again. Oh dear. Yeah, I've had friends that have got skips, and I have had some. I will get rid of the odd bit of stuff in a normal dustbin, but if I've been busy and I've got absolute bags of it, I can't put it out for the dustman. God bless them. That might take the odd bag, but if they can't move the bin, they're not very happy. Oh dear. Zoltar, you bought some stilts at the weekend. Any tips? Yeah, just get on them and have a practice walking around in them. If they have got the spring-loaded bits, which they should have in the sort of the middle part of the stilt, you can adjust those to make something to do with the way that they bend, and you can make them tighter or looser to make them easier to walk in. But the only way you find out is to put them on, try walking in them, and then adjusting the little adjustments that are on the top or bottom of the springs. And obviously first practice walking around a room. Make sure there's nothing you can trip on, because the rubber feet on those, they can catch on anything, any nails sticking up out of a floor. I wouldn't practice on them on a job for somebody else. So yeah, I'd practice walking around in your house first, or in your garage, or don't practice outside, because floor is deadly outside. I did try that once when I first bought them, and realised really quickly it's not a good idea. They are there to use indoors, and if you're doing a job, as I cover everything in plastic, you cannot put cloth dust sheets down on the floor and then use stilts, because the odds of the rubber feet dragging and getting caught in a dust sheet and you taking a dive is really good. But if you've got plastic put down, the decent stuff that I use, the thick gear, and you tape it all down so it doesn't move, then the stilts on top of that, fantastic, no problems at all. I filled my home bin with the stuff and poked my eye through the blinds, so I took it away. I had done it, Max, with some rubbish before, and one of the bins, because I've got quite a big bin, I could just about move it, and my guy still took it. But depends what street you live in, whether a dustman, if he thinks it's a little bit too heavy, they'll just leave it. So, which wouldn't have made my wife very happy if I'd stuck some heavy plaster in the bag and they didn't take it because I'd overdone it. Cheers, Eddie. Yeah, it's as I say, yeah, you can get the smaller stilts, Eddie, but I mean, if you're tall enough, then they might do the job for most height ceilings. But when I looked at them, because the smaller ones didn't have an adjustment up. If the smaller ones, well, not the ones I tried to buy anyway. If you can buy smaller ones and they do adjust up, then you'd be laughing. But I don't think they do them. I think the smaller stilts are just for people that don't want to stand on stilts that are too high. No, if I'm going over a tapered board, John, I would just cover. I'll just let the plaster fill the taper as I go. I mean, because most of the boards I set that I put up, they're all square edge because I don't use tapered edges. Because tapered edge board is really for taping and jointing, because it allows that gap to put the paper tape in and to put the filler in between the boards. But if a customer has done their own boarding and they've used tapered edge, then I'll just put my scrim along the joint like I normally do, and I'll just let the finish fill the void. Because it's not that deep. You could bond over them first, and then but it's more messing about, and it could cause you grief if when you set it the bonding's not gone off enough, or if the bonding's a bit dry, and then where you put bonding in the gap, the strips where the bonding are will dry quicker than where the finish is elsewhere, and it's the next day and you put PVA on it, but you don't want to do all that, so just use the finish to fill the tapered edge. Eddie, are the plastic coverings you put down in a customer's house reusable? Not for me. I do tend to chuck it out at the end of the day. I mean, the gear I buy, I get it on a roll. The roll is about 1 metre long, and once you've cut up, you roll it out. and once you've cut it off, you can open it out because it's folded up, and I'm pretty sure it's like about 100 square metres on the whole roll, and it's about 20 quid, and it's a decent thickness that if it's on a carpet, and that's how I tape mine down with any kind of tape that's fairly cheap around the edges, and does really well. The stilts don't rip it. Just walking around generally on it's absolutely fine. You can even wash it off if you can be bothered. I only do that if a customer says, can you leave your plastic down, because we want to paint, and rather than us having to cover our carpet again, we can use your plastic, and then I'll give it a bit of a wash because it looks horrible when it's covered in plaster. But I normally pull it up and chuck it away. But it's something I've used for years, and it's great because it's just such good protection, and you don't want to be messing up anybody's carpet, especially if they've bought a new one and then decided to have plastering done, which is often the case. It's not so great on a hard floor because it can stretch on a hard floor from a ladder or whatever, and it rips easier. But because carpet's got some give in it, the plastic tends to just give into the part of the carpet rather than rip. But on a solid floor, that plastic can still rip. If it's a quality floor, if it's just old floorboards, I won't worry too much about that, and I'll just use plastic. But a job I did last year, they had a brand new oak floor put down, and then they had an issue with their ceiling. It was in their lounge, and it was like a black oak floor, and I'm thinking about, I don't want to have to pay for this if I damage it. So I'd put plastic down on that, and then I bought the tough spot black stuff you can buy. It comes in 8x4s. It's like a corrugated protective board. Stuck those all down over the floor. Tape those together. They're a bit of a pain, and they are we can buy them in bulk cheaper, but if you just buy them from B&Q, they're the best part of a £5 each for an 8x4. A bit of protection, but it's better to pay that, and hopefully if you've priced well enough for a job, you can cover the price of those, and you won't damage the floor, because you don't want to damage the floor that's going to, as well as not getting paid because you damaged their floor, they probably want money from you to get the floor fixed or replaced. So always put something tough down other than just the plastic sheeting. If it's on an expensive type hard floor, if it's just floorboards, then if you do get any little rips in it, you can just wipe little bits of plaster off the floor afterwards, and it's not an issue. But for carpet, it's fantastic. Always talk about unblocked drains. I think I jinxed myself. I'm on call, and I've got a driver now to go unblock someone's toilet. Good last year, thanks. Look forward to it. Cheers, mate. I love brown bread toast. Drop us a line. I'll send you the phone number for the studio so you can ring in on the next one. And have fun with that toilet, mate. Oh dear, yeah, should have been a plasterer. You might need to go. There's a final dry trowel, plastic or stainless steel. I always use stainless steel, flexi blades, flexi trowels of any sort to finish off Zoltar. Some people are using plastic float, and if they're happy with the finish that it gives, then that's fine. Go for that. But I haven't got a preference as such. It's whatever. At the end of the day, whatever you use, whether you finish off with a plastic trowel or a metal one, is if you're happy with it, it's easy for you to work with, and it gives a nice finish, and a finish that you're happy with, and more importantly that the customer's happy with, then finish on the plastic trowel. Max, even today, mate, I have gone out. I've underpriced this one. It happens, and as I've been doing this for so long, and I still sometimes will underprice a job. It's only because I'm such a nice geezer. I don't want to overprice any of my jobs. One, because I like to get them, and two, because I always like to give a fair price to my customers. But sometimes that has shot me in the foot. Well, I've gone, that's about right, and then I've had an issue. And I tell my customers beforehand, I'm giving you a fixed price. if anything goes a bit pear-shaped, unless it's something obviously I've got no control over, like something massive falls down, that's nothing to do with me. But if a job takes me a bit longer because it's my fault, then there's not going to be an extra charge for it. But yeah, so I have shot myself in the foot underpricing. You just have to be a little bit careful when you're putting a price in. And it's good to go home and generally I won't give a ballpark figure. When people say, if I go round to look a job to quote and people say to me, I'll give us a ballpark how much it's going to cost, I'll say, look, yeah, I'd love to, but it'll be vastly out. I said, yeah. I said, and probably not in your favour, so I'm going to go home, put it in writing and email it to you, and that you've got something solid then. I don't want to guesstimate a price here, because you can think, oh, actually, yeah, I could bash that out in this amount of time off the top of your head, give them a price, and then you get home and you start thinking about it and working it out, and you think, oh, hang on a minute, I didn't allow for whatever it might have been, and it can cost you dear. So yeah, just be careful with the old pricing up jobs. Yeah, I watch other plastering channels. I watch, I mentioned earlier, I keep forgetting his name. Blaine Gray, I think his name is. He's got about 30,000 subscribers to his channel. Plastering for Beginners, if you want to look him up. He's not been plastering as long as I have, but he is a great plasterer. He's always trying out different tools, different trowels, and reviewing them on his channel. So yeah. I watch him mostly. I mean, I have a flick through some other plasterers' channels, but at the end of the day, I'm either busy editing my own, or at work, or doing quotes, or whatever the things that come with being a one-man band as a plasterer and having to sort out. But yeah, I'd love an unpaid secretary, but the wife's not interested. Dear. Frankie, hello Frankie. Just bought a new Marshalltown trowel, 16x4. Yeah. Have you ever tried this size? If so, any good? Yeah, I've used some amazingly large Marshalltowns. In I think back in the I think it's the late 80s. I was working in a hotel for a Green Park Hotel, somewhere in London anyway. And a lot of the guys, there's tons of skimming to do in these hallways. And I had a standard size Marshalltown then, and these guys were skimming with, I don't know, 24, they looked like they were thinking back 24-inch or more the length of these trowels. And I thought, God, yeah, get one of them, because think how much you can, how easy it must be to skim over those. But getting your gear off of a hawk, especially if it's a standard size hawk and you use an oversized trowel. But that size, mate, is absolutely fine, yeah. Yeah, the shorter, stumpier trowels, I don't particularly get on with, and I tended to find when I moved to a bigger trowel, a Marshalltown trowel, that I did a better job of it straight away. But at the end of the day, it's what you get used to. But yeah, I'd recommend that one, that size. Yeah, there was another job, Max, that I did years ago for a guy that was a perfectionist, and there was rendering to do outside when I still did outside rendering as well. I was doing the inside and the outside of his place, and I had the cement mixer. I'd hired it, and I had it so long that the hire charge cost me more than it would have cost me to buy the mixer. I mean, the guy at the place, he wouldn't let me buy the mixer. He said, no mate, you have to hire, you have paid that up, and if you want to buy a mixer, that'll be another 400 quid or whatever it was at the time. And after that I bought my own mixer, and I thought, I'm not going to hire a mixer again if I do any like big jobs, just in case it runs over. Junior, Eric, I'm plastering my house, but the walls keep cracking up. I've tried 3-to-1, 4-to-1, PVA, etc. Even neat, like you say, but it's still cracking. Any tips? When you say, are you talking about like maybe 1 or 2 really fine hairline cracks that come out quite a bit later, or if it's cracking straight away, then any cracks you've got underneath in the original, it's always a good idea to put a fiberglass tape over the top of them. If you haven't done that already, I'd definitely recommend doing that to stop them coming back through the new stuff. If the plaster behind is moving badly, then you'd probably need to take at least the finish off, if not the backing. But normally it's the finish that comes loose on old walls, and the backing coat's normally fairly sound. Yeah, and as I say, I always use my PVA neat, and I don't skim over it 9 times out of 10 until it's bone dry, the PVA, as opposed to doing it when it's tacky. But that's the only tips that I'll give you, Junior, on that one. Yeah, oh, Salter. Eric, use render mesh. I've never used a render mesh. This job that I did 2 or 3 weeks ago, for a customer I said that I've worked for before, I gave him I said you can get all different types of meshes now, because there's quite a lot of different render meshes you can buy. I said if you want to buy any of those, because he was supplying the materials on this job, and I'll use it. But prior to that, I hadn't done any rendering for so long. When I used to do it before, there was no render mesh, so I've not used it as of yet. So, I've seen it used, and it seems to be okay. I mean, you put your first coat on basically and just squash the mesh into it, which if you've been plastering long enough, that shouldn't cause you a problem. I would imagine it does give you a much stronger surface there and a bit less chance of cracking. But with sand and cement, because it's so rigid, it is prone to cracking. If you're doing any internal rendering with sand and cement that's going to have a skim on it, it's definitely never skim the sand and cement the same day. It can set hard enough that you could put a skim over it, but you can get some amazingly terrible cracks come through, because as the cement dries, it shrinks, and if the finish is already on there, that does the same, and that will the cracks come through the finish. They're not really structural. It's still solid as a rock, but the cracks just look terrible, and your customer will have a hippie fit that his walls falling off, and you don't want that to happen. So yeah, when it comes to cracks and any kind of stuff you're using, and the say plaster today has got no flexibility in it at all, so and the odd hairline crack in a new wall, as I like tell my customers, you can't guarantee that they won't get one, but most of them, the hairline cracks are so fine that a couple of coats of paint will fill them. Eddie, what do you do if you see any dips in your plaster after you have finished with your metal speed skim? Do you use fat from you? Yeah, if I've got any dips at all, Eddie, then I will. If I'm still getting fat off the wall, then I'll use the fat to fill them. But again, with any of that, you just have to be careful. Excuse me, have to be careful as you go, because yeah, if you've got dips in the wall and it's gone too far and there is no more fat, then you're stuffed basically if it looks bad. But yeah. Right, okay, guys. Don't know how long we've been running, but I'm going to call it a night for tonight. Thanks for coming. I say, all of you guys, drop us an email, and I'll send you the number to the studio, so we can get a few phone calls in at the next one. It's booked in for a month's time, but I might do one sooner. But we'll see how it goes. Obviously, I'll put the usual advert out there to say that it's coming up. But tomorrow or the next day, my latest video is coming out. That's damp inside, where the wall's got quite a lot of black and green in it, where the customer's downpipe had been leaking for years. And it's me basically hacking that off, putting back a waterproof sand and cement render, and then a skim over the top of that, and how that's done. So that'll be out, should be out tomorrow on my channel, so if you want to take a look at that. And yeah, cool. Yeah, well, that arch came out alright at the end of the day, mate. So he paid me, and he lives across the road from me, so he's a neighbour. So he would have been yeah. No worries, Bladeboard. Cheers, Max. Right, guys. I'll see you soon, and yeah, keep up the good work, as they say at the end of a lot of these buildery type channels and stuff. Right, here we go. Boom, boom, boom. Right, this is Eric the Plasterer signing out. See you soon. Cheers, guys.